Okay, Diane Menashe, welcome to the Keri Croft Show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Well, it's you. Can't say no.
Well, you could, but I'm really glad you didn't.
Wouldn't.
Love you, mean it. So, you walked up with this sweater on today, and I have this in my notes. See, it says eyes. Mm-hmm. So I was already going to bring this up to you because you've probably heard this before, and I think it every time we're together, but you have the most arrestingly beautiful eyeballs. Do people tell you that?
Not with the words arrestingly, though
well,
appropriate.
I'm trying to use any
beautifully.
I'm putting it all in.
But I do appreciate it. They're hazel.
Yeah, so they're hazel,
rare.
but they're like yellow. And so that coupled with sort of who you are as a person, it's like someone meets you at first, you're like, I'm Diane Menashe, and these eyeballs just like come out. It's just a part of the whole big package.
Yeah. And then that's coupled with the resting bitch face, and you get an intimidating package. But that's not who I am, as you know.
Which you're going to be like a little tiny onion today. We're just going to peel it right back, right?
Something to look forward to.
Oh,
yes.
100%. So I would love to know, so, as a child, like you in child form, what was that like? Like, what were you like as a kid? Like a young kid, like maybe 6 or 7.
A lot of big wheels, setting my Barbies on fire. Not that I was a pyromaniac, but I just didn't see the need for Barbie.
I didn't either.
Or I just didn't get Barbie, and certainly didn't get Ken. Never.
Don't get Ken.
And I still don't get Ken. You know what I mean? That's sort of a lifelong problem. But back to Barbie. There's a lot of big wheels. There's a lot of in the dirt. Even then didn't like to wear dresses, but my mother. There was a lot of dresses back then. Like the family where you would have to get dressed to go on the airplane.
Oh, yeah.
Like you were going to church. That was our family.
You have to be perfect. You have to look perfect, right?
Yeah, because she didn't want to see what was going on the inside. So the exterior
Fantastic.
was beautiful.
That's for another podcast.
Yes.
Okay, so I read, because I'm very prepared here.
Okay.
So I've gotten tons of questions, by the way. So one question is obviously, when did Diane know? When did she have this aha moment that her destiny was to be an attorney? And so I understand that in 2nd grade, you had to defend Tommy the toothbrush. So give me a little backdrop on Tommy the toothbrush.
So before I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, I thought I wanted to be an actress.
That's actually, they
do go hand in hand. So I tried out for the play. And the role that I got was defending Tommy the toothbrush. And of course, the plot line, given my client, but it was about the value of brushing your teeth, as the storylines went in 2nd grade. So needless to say, I defended Tommy the toothbrush. And I was like, this is amazing. But it wasn't this, the acting. It was like this, the defending Tommy.
And Tommy
exonerated. Yes.
Side note. And I won. So did that really as you grew up as a child, you're like, I'm going to be a lawyer.
Totally. And then I would see TV shows or I'm dating myself old school, the sides of buses with TV show placards. And I would see the woman and I would be like, that's going to be me.
Are you on any buses yet?
I mean, # goals.
That's 2023 goals.
Yeah, I skipped over buses and I've gone to other places.
If I don't see you on a park bench,
for sure I'm on park benches. Just my name and some expletives. Yeah,
perfect. So then you venture on to Purdue.
Yeah,
and now I did learn some new things about you, surprisingly, that I didn't know. Being that I'm your friend now, I didn't know you went to Purdue to play softball. And I really didn't know that you kind of transitioned into being on the rowing team.
Yeah. And before Purdue, there was an interesting part of my life. I went to boarding school. So it's from Seattle, went to high school, boarding school in Palo Alto. Loved me some softball, went to Purdue.
What position were you in softball?
I was third base.
Okay.
And then I get to Purdue, and as life is, that didn't love the coach. I got there early, didn't love the coach, as sometimes happens, And then I had a roommate named Keri. We were walking across.
She had to be awesome.
Keri was a badass. Yeah. But Carrie.
Oh, got it.
Same thing.
Okay.
Same thing. Just
got it.
And she's still a badass, actually. But we're walking across this quad, and the rowing coach was walking towards us, Jeff Houston, and he stops us. Really, he stopped Keri because she was huge and fit, and was like, you know what, we're having a call out, for walk-on rowers. You should come. And Keri was not there to play sport. And Keri, we walked away, and she's like, oh, she was from Michigan. She's like, oh, I always thought it would be so cool to do rowing. And I was from Seattle, so I had all these friends that were rowers because it's a thing in Seattle. And she's like, I'll do it if you do it. And I was like, well, I mean, it won't impact my recruit or anything. So sure. And
so you end up being the stroke.
So it goes.
So it goes with Diane Menashe.
Just next thing you know, I was the stroke. And then I spent my summers on the pre-elite team in rowing.
Explain what the stroke is to the layman who doesn't know about rowing. Or it's basically the most competitive.
It is. You set the pace.
That just doesn't fit you at all, does it? Set that tone.
And I was like, if I wasn't stroke in any given day or practice, I was just,
upset.
Yes, you set the pace. You're not the biggest. You're not the strongest. You are the most competitive, and you're the most consistent.
And you set the rhythm of the row, right?
Yes. And so the coxswain actually faces you, and then in an 8, there's 7 people behind you. So it was awesome. And then I spent my summers doing it. And then when I went to law school, I coached the varsity women's team at Tulane. And then when I moved here, I coached at Westerville High School. Rowing really became a big part of my life.
I love it. And that really made it connected the Orange Theory dots too.
Yes.
I was like, okay, that makes so much sense. I mean, you're back. Yeah, of course you do.
And if you ask the people there on the rower, I'm like, no one's beating me. I don't know, even if you're a man, gender matters none.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So next thing you know, you're this criminal defense attorney kind of making your way up the ranks.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to start with 2017, Reagan-Tokes. I know that's been several years ago, but I do think I just want, first of all, to explain to people what it is that you don't compromise on in terms of the Constitution and the death penalty. So if there ever was an emotionally charged case, it would be the murder of Reagan-Tokes. I went back and researched. I was looking at videos of her parents and all that. And it's horrific what happened to her. But yet we live in the United States of America. We have a constitution, and you had a job to do in spite of the criticism, in spite of how do you sleep at night, and in spite of all of those things, right? And I'm going to play you a little.
Over the past few days, Brian Golsby's defense team has honed in on one strategy: keep Brian Golsby alive.
No one's ever stood in front of Brian and said, I'm sorry. No one's ever stood in front of Brian and said, I accept responsibility for all the shitty things I did to you.
Defense attorney Diane Menashe ran down a long list of factors she said impacted Brian Golsby's life and impaired his ability to make good choices. She mentioned his abusive mother, an absent father, alcohol and drug-dependent relatives, the fact that Golsby was raped as a child but was never treated properly, so that he raped others, that he spent time in the Department of Youth Services as a child for petty crimes and came out worse, that he served prison time and came out worse, that he was placed on a GPS ankle monitor but not tracked.
What is the point of the bracelet if you don't track it? They failed Brian, and because of that, they failed Reagan-Tokes.
She blamed the system and asked jurors to spare Golsby's life.
I beg you, do not kill him.
So
I actually still get goosebumps from that because I got so emotional during that closing argument because I really believed, as I do in any argument I put forth, but I really believed in that argument, and I felt that it was possible, given the case, that they could give him death, even in Franklin County. And so I actually was really emotional, and you can hear it in my voice. If you know me, you can hear it in my voice.
Well, I think what's great about anything I've watched you do, your emotion comes through, and it's electric. I mean, everything I've watched, you can feel it pouring out, and it's authentic and it's sincere. But even when you said at the end, please don't kill him, like you didn't use the word life, because again, we don't want people to be like, oh, Brian Golsby deserves to have this great, I think the way you use those words too, were just, please just spare this guy, spare his life. But you didn't say the word life. And I think that's.
Yeah. I think part of the reason why I've been successful is because I really understand the power of words. And it was not about what you just, what you were just referencing, right? It wasn't about letting him live, because quite frankly, I could understand everyone in the jury understanding or thinking, oh, I don't want him to live. Yeah. Why should I give him that grace? So it wasn't about framing it as let him live, right? It was about the responsibility is on you to not kill him. And there were these systemic failures. And actually, Ben, the reporter that was just reporting on that, he often gets stories wrong, most often. But Ben, actually, I like the way that he...
Shout out to Ben.
Ben, you know what? Next time you call me, I might call back. But Ben knows I have a policy. I don't talk to media while a case is pending. But no, he got that right. It was just so many systemic failures. And so, in the end, it was just don't kill him. And it wasn't about let him live or give him life, right? Because that's kind of, I see so many criminal defense attorneys and death penalty cases argue that, give him life. And that was too gracious for Brian, the ask to give him life. I thought for most it would be, for sure.
Yeah.
And I understood that.
Yeah. I think for you, though, you don't believe in the death penalty.
Right.
It doesn't matter what the crime. So you can't pick apart and go, oh, but what if they were a pedophile? What if they murdered this? It matters, of course, greatly what someone did. But the point is, across the board, you don't believe in the death penalty.
No. And in fact, I think it's important for people to know when they're like, how does she take those cases? So any capital case, the client is typically indigent, so they don't have the ability to afford counsel. So unlike most cases, it gets assigned to the judge that will handle it. And then you have to have a special license to do a capital case. And so the judge will have his or her list of attorneys that are licensed in that area, that are, really experienced in capital work. And then they will select which attorneys they want to do that case. And usually judges select attorneys kind of two criteria. One is that they know they will get along with for an extended period of time, because the cases are very, very prolonged litigation, 2-3 years before they actually go to trial. And two is judges want to make sure that they have attorneys on the case that will do it right and it won't be reversed on ineffective assistance of counsel or something like that. So they need good attorneys and they need attorneys that they'll get along with. So
that pretty much rules out a lot of people.
It somehow makes me go at the top. So Brian Golsby, Judge Sarek got the case and he calls me. This is how Quentin Smith, this is how every capital case I've done, almost 40 now. This is how every case starts with the Menashe. I got this case. And of course, when you get the call, you're in the court, you know which case it is, because you're kind of like, who's going to get the call, And I got the call, and I want to go back to your point about it's about the Constitution. In no call have I ever asked what are the facts, pause because of the facts. I mean, I just say yes. It's about nothing other than the ask, because I think that, the constitutional right to due process and to fair trial and equal protection, it's everything.
Yeah.
And so when I have a moment to really make sure that those constitutional rights are being provided, not just to Brian Golsby, but when they are provided to Brian Golsby, they're provided to all of us, that I take the opportunity.
Yeah. So this leads to my next question. I want you to walk me through when you went and saw Brian Golsby and you're in this room. And all I mean, of course, I have like Silence of the Lambs and Clarice is in there and Hannibal. Like I have these sensationalized, movie pictures of what that would be like. But what were you, when you had to sit down with him alone in a room, what were you feeling? Was there any part of you that was like, ooh, or did you just go into total lawyer mode? Is he handcuffed? Like, can you just paint kind of a picture for what that was like?
Sure. But I'll say that the moment that I first met Brian sticks out to me no different from any other moment, because I really am, I don't walk into a room through the lens of judgment. I
Right.
walk into the room to say, hey, I'm Diane. I'm going to be your lawyer. Here's what's about to happen. So it's the first meeting is
Yeah.
very process oriented. I don't ask clients what happened. In fact, I don't ask clients what happened sometimes for a very long time, depending on the strategy. I don't presume that I'm going to walk into a room with someone, any human, by the way, could be you, could be Brian Golsby, and you're going to tell me your deepest, darkest secrets within minutes of meeting me. That's just who do I think I am?
Right.
So when I see other defense attorneys sit down first meeting, and they're like, okay, so tell me about what happened. What did you do? And then the client isn't like totally forthcoming, and they're like, oh God, the guy's just an asshole. And I'm like, is he? Because I wouldn't trust you either. And then add race to it. I mean, I'm being serious. Like a white girl walks in that's like, you know, my age and is like, hey, your life's in my hands. You didn't have any choice in the matter, but welcome to me.
Right.
You know, and all that like personal dynamic. And so I respect the process. And I know that earning trust is really important. So I don't speak to my clients about the facts of the case. I would actually say the earliest is probably 3 visits. Sometimes I just say, let's wait and see what they have, because it's easier if you have a client that isn't ready to accept responsibility. It's easier to go about it from seeing what they have and then picking apart what they have and getting the narrative in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. But one more thing.
But they're I wanted to, you know, it's like Jack Menashe, my dad used to, it takes a certain someone to be in the room to do the work because the clients aren't cuffed.
Yeah. So he's just sitting there with you. Is anybody else in there?
Sure is
No one.
not. The door is locked, and in the workhouse there's no panic button, or in the Franklin County Jail there's no panic button. You know, and the clients are smart enough to realize that. They see the room, there's no button. And you know, there's not like there's a vestibule or, you know, deputy desk that's looking in the room. So all things could go wrong.
Yeah,
could go real wrong.
Okay.
And it's very small. The room itself is it's this close with me and the client, and then the room is just sort of the border of that space. It's incredibly small.
Was his energy overtly evil? Was it sad? Was it aloof? What was it?
Brian, you know, I've just answered it like this. You know, Brian was Brian. You know, I pause because I have a co-counsel on the case. And usually what happens just in life, like with our partnerships, you know, it's like you take out the trash because you like to take out the trash, you know. You know, you just, and that's what you do actually when you have a co-counsel in a trial. You just figure out like, what do you like to do? What are you good at? And then I'm going to do this. And then where nobody's good at that, we're going to have to divvy that space up. But this is where I'm going with this. You know, I'm the bad cop on co-counsel teams, always. I've never played the good cop, even in second grade. And usually as the bad cop, I'm the one that doesn't visit the client as much because you do want to have the client trust. And I can be very, you know, contentious. And there isn't a need for that, really. There's just not really a need for that. And so while I spent a significant amount of time with Brian working up to mitigation, I will tell you that the 6 months before trial, my co-counsel and I agreed that that he would take lead on the client visits. Like real lead on it.
Yeah.
Like I knew that I was going to do the bulk of the trial and the entire sentencing phase. And so I just needed space. But that's not an indictment on Brian. That's an indictment on, I just needed space because it was so heavy.
Yeah.
And I had to like really get my mind right. Because I knew we'd be in a sentencing phase. I mean, we essentially conceded guilt in the opening.
Yeah. And one more thing before we move on to Husel and Jose. I'm glad to see that they had some Reagan-Tokes legislation passed, because I feel like when you look at the fact that Brian Golsby had the ankle bracelet on and he had just been going through German Village, robbing and doing whatever he was doing. And then after the fact, they're like, oh, let's look at the GPS. And I get it. There's only so many caseworkers and there's so many, people out there and all of that. But I just feel like if I were her parents and her family, and you look back at that and you're like, God, he was just walking around with this ankle bracelet on with no one paying attention.
Of course, I think that there need to be laws And when you break the law, there need to be consequences. But I will say something about the Reagan-Tokes case is I agree that the facts were horrific. And it was a struggle for me because it was sort of like every woman's nightmare. But the truth is, I've had capital cases that actually, if you divorce yourself from Reagan-Tokes' family, the fact that she came from affluence, the fact that her parents were on the media, that, you know what, I've had capital cases that were, you know, multiple children, where the victims were Black. And, you know, the families didn't have the power and the presence to be able to really get in front of a camera and to get an audience like the Tokes did. And I think, and so I just say this, I understand, I really do understand as much as one can that isn't experiencing it, why and how the Tokes, you know, were very vocal about what happened to their daughter in that case. But I also think it's really tragic that there's so many other people that are killed, that their story, nobody cares about their stories. You know, moms that have lost 2 sons to gang violence. And when I say 2, it's going to be 3 or 4. Nobody cares about their stories.
They don't hear about their stories.
They don't.
Yeah.
And so while I completely understand how and why they exercise their power, it's so sad to me, and I really mean this, there's so many stories. I wish there were fewer. But to have a child murdered, horrible, like horrible. And there's many parents out there that have had more than one child murdered. And so I hear you.
Yeah. No, and I agree. And as I was doing research on this and going back and revisiting that, there were a couple of other cases that inevitably were brought up that I don't remember that case. Why weren't we talking about that? So that's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down. I just, you know, in general, hope that we can have some kind of like a better way to track people so that if they're, you know, it's just crazy.
No, and it was part of the failure. And, you know, sometimes we win, sometimes we learn. Yep. That's my, you know, motto. And I certainly think it's a situation where we learn. Yeah. I also want to say greatness from that is the jury. The jury was, I mean, we went back there afterwards and spent a significant amount of time with them, like hours. And, you know, they went home the first night and they said they were 6-6, life, death, 6-6, which blew my mind. That like 6 people were on the side of life. And in most capital cases, after they deliberate for days, once they think they have a verdict, they do sleep on it. That's very customary. And I think that's the way it should be done. Mm-hmm. You're making a decision of that gravity. You should sleep on it. Yeah. And they did. And they came back the next day as they told the story. And it was 8-4. 4 were still life. And there's a law in Ohio that it has to be unanimous, either one way or the other, or there's a third verdict form that says, you know, we're split, we can't decide. And that was the form they filled out. But what was amazing about it was they were so, you know, they still have annual picnics. They were so respectful. The 4 were so respectful of the 8, and the 8 was so respectful of the 4. Which is, I can't even explain to you how mind-blowing that is, right? That you could be so, because they both understood the views of the other. And I took that as like such a success, and I don't mean to be like a narcissist about this, but I took that as such a success for me because I made space for a really, really hard conversation. Mm-hmm. You know, mental health, the fact that he was raped as a child, reactive perpetration, putting responsibility on the parole board, putting responsibility on our school system, on our Department of Youth Services, on our foster care. That we have to be able to give responsibility to those systems. Yeah. Right? To be able to understand, you know, how someone like Brian could be the person that he is. 100%. Yeah. And so I was just, there was such camaraderie in the room, hugging each other. It was incredible. And I just thought what a moment it was that, you know, jurors that do capital cases are never the same. Oh, they're never the same. And just that they had created this family and had really communicated through the most difficult thing. Mm-hmm. And I will say, in following your career, like watching you, you're brilliant with the jury. Well, it's my favorite part.
You really are.
It's my favorite part.
Talk about winning people over.
I mean, oh my gosh, it's my favorite part.
And it shows. Okay, so let's pivot. Let's make a move here. So you have this trial, and then we'll kind of jump over the Westerville cop killer trial you did. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then so I want to go because I want to get into some Husel action here for so many reasons. Okay.
It's a good one.
Well, here's there's so many, and I have some questions. I have some very just catty little questions in my head. So Jose Baez.
Yeah.
Right. So he's looking for an attorney. You're in your driveway. You call because you worked with him at Harvard. You're like, hey, bud, what are you doing? Like, you got the dime here.
Yeah.
The rest is history. So when you first meet Jose, and he's done, Casey Anthony and Hernandez and all this. Uh-huh. Like when you already knew him, but like when you're working with him at this level and you guys are first starting to work together, is he a sexy guy initially, or is he like, what's his like presence in a room? Because is he short? Like,
I'm really hoping. I mean, he's gonna love it that I say this. Like, if you ever want to like have Jose on as a guest, here's how you're gonna get it. I'm gonna give it to you. Okay. No, I'm gonna give it to you right now.
Spoon feed me.
He super sexy. No, this is going to get Jose on your show.
You're super sexy.
Is that I said this about him. There's something super sexy about him. Listen, you can't get the results he does.
Right.
Without like the je ne sais quoi about him, right? Mm-hmm. And he walks in a room and he's got this confidence despite the fact that he's my height. I'm not going to say short, but short. And he's got good style.
Okay.
Speaks multiple languages. And here's the thing that he has that I don't have. And I have a lot of things that he doesn't have.
We'll get to that.
That's maybe
we'll get to that.
Maybe a longer list. But the clients love him. The clients love him.
He has
We worked on another case together and the clients love him.
Yeah, he seems like he has the visual theatric kind of thing that not every attorney, I don't think a lot of lawyers have that. Like, so he was a yin to your yang though, kind of like
totally,
because you're not letting one detail go by.
No, and you know what? I will say this all day long. Best co-counsel should be someone that is so different from me, not just gender, or even race, ideally, but in all the ways. Mm-hmm. And some people might have thought, like from surface, that Jose and I, if you knew us, we both kind of had big personalities. But in a courtroom with a jury, the way we present, the way we question witnesses could not be more different. Yeah. Could not be more different.
So I want to...
And I do love him.
Well, I mean he sounds like a very lovable...
He's like a,
sexy animal is what he sounds like. So let's do this. I want for most people, because if I know I have a hard time understanding the Dr. Husel case, and we could talk all day about it, but I think for just the average pea brain like me, maybe if you could just help set the tone for really like what was the crux of that. So like when I first heard about this, I'm like, wait, is this doctor, is he a serial killer? Really? Is he really wanting to go around and kill people? And then on the other side, you're like, well, wait, he's in the ICU, so he's got patients who are in pain.
Who are critical.
And so then in my head, have you seen the movie Terms of Endearment?
Yes.
Shirley, okay, so I'm going to show off my mixing skills here, but this is what I think about all the time with this case, and I can't, this is the scene.
Excuse me. It is after 10. Give my daughter the pain shot, please.
Mrs. Greenway, I was going to.
Oh, good. Go ahead.
In just a few minutes.
Well, please, it's after 10. It's after 10. I don't see why she has to have this pain.
Ma'am, it's not my patient.
It's time for her shot. You understand? Do something. All she has to do is hold out until 10. And it's past 10. She's in pain. My daughter is in pain. Give her the shot. You understand?
You're going to behave.
Give my daughter the shot. Thank you very much. Thank you.
$100. Jose has never seen Terms of Endearment because somehow he would have integrated that into his closing. He loves movie clips.
Listen, Jose, I'm looking for an assistant job. I could be your Aaron Brockovich.
Find Keri.
So yeah. So but in all seriousness, I find that just in my head, it would be very hard when you have a multitude of patients with different pain levels and different diagnoses and all this stuff, and you're trying to manage their pain, and there's no process or protocol, right, on how much, or, I mean, I know to a point there is, but everything I was reading, it's like, well, there's plurality and all this doctor speak, and I want to understand for a dummy like me, what was the deal with this? Just in a
Well, first I want to say, and it was kind of goes back to my comment about Ben, the reporter, whose last name I intentionally don't say. You know, that case, like one of the hardest facts of that case wasn't even a fact at all. It was the pretrial publicity, which was literally a lie. I mean, the way the case was portrayed in the media was like under the cover of darkness. He was like going in and like putting fentanyl in these IVs, and these patients were dying. First of all, I mean, none of these patients, not one of them, right, were taken off of life support without their families saying DNRCC. So in every single one of the patients, the family had to, per protocol, make the decision to terminate all life-saving measures. First of all, that's huge. Second of all, once that was done, and those decisions, by the way, were made in every single case over hours, if not days. Chaplains were called in, because let's remember it was Mount Carmel. There was spiritual care workers with every single family before the decision was made. And then, of course, once the decision is made, right, and all life support saving measures are terminated, so vasopressors are shut down, vent is someone extubation happens. Then there's the process and the time. I mean, Husel, right? Dr. Husel, obviously didn't administer any drugs whatsoever. So that was like a whole other thing that I remember the jurors in our case being even surprised about it, right? I mean, were the orders given by Dr. Husel? Yes, certainly. But there's all these other individuals, not just the nurses that pulled the meds from the Pyxis machine, and another nurse that actually like filled the syringe and then did the drip into the IV. But no order is made unless it goes down to the basement of the hospital and the pharmacist reviews it. Now, there was a lot of talk about overrides in this case, and I won't go into it, but really importantly is that every single one of these family members or of these individuals had family members that made the decision to DNRCC. The other thing I think it's really important for people to understand about Husel that the media did not talk about is that, two of these individuals came in on OD. Every single one of these individuals, every single one, and I mean this, there was no evidence to suggest that they were ever leaving the ICU, ever. It was really a question, and even how the state presented the case ultimately, because they asked them for lesser included of reckless homicide at the end of the trial. And their theory was that he hastened the death. So really the argument was instead of living 36 minutes once all life-saving measures were pulled, they could have lived potentially 48 minutes, which you can't prove that difference. Because, you just can't. But really, I think one of the biggest facts for us in picking a jury was all of the pretrial publicity that was so false. I mean, it was so false, just completely. And he was the ICU intensivist that worked the night shift. So he's the guy in charge. But I just say, like, for instance, 2 of the patients, their families decided to DNRCC them when he wasn't even on shift. He had nothing to do with the decision. He wasn't even there. And then he comes on, right? And it just, the facts were so poorly portrayed by the media because they loved the sensational story that they made it.
Well, and somebody had to be the scapegoat for all of this, right?
And to that scapegoat, Mount Carmel really started that narrative from the beginning, and they were pushing out pieces through their PR person, and they were calling him the villain in their press releases. And, the media really ran with that.
Why would you ever put that word in a press release?
Yeah.
I'm confused by that. I really am.
Well, no, they hired a PR company that really steered them wrong.
Well, you should fire them. You're fired.
No one hired that company.
You're not coming on my podcast.
Also, hospitals. There was a lot of errors that Mount Carmel did, not just throughout the pendency of the whole situation. But you know, their damage control or their was really a nightmare.
How did that moment feel when you heard not guilty, like for you personally, with all the work? I mean, you just put so much into it. What was your, like, when you first heard it?
I did, because, you know, I mean, I'll never forget it. I went into that courtroom and it was, you know, we had the multi-tables because we had such a big defense team, and it was just me and William because they deliberated for 6 days. And we just stood at the table, and I mean, I felt so sick. I felt so sick, and I'm good with stress. I'm like, there was so much tension in the room, and the country was actually watching. Like, the country was watching, and there you could hear a pin drop, not an expression. That had to be the true meaning of that expression right then. And William and I shared some words, and you know, it just, the moment would have been so different if Jose had been there, if anyone else had been there, and then, you know, I feel like the nation got to see me there.
Yeah. No, I think it was all meant to be.
It was all fucking perfect in the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really was. And the trial evolved. And Jose would say this, you know, everybody's like, oh, it's Jose. It's Jose's case, you know, and we started the case, and, you know, Jose, he's not a planner, and I'm a planner. You know, I want to know who's doing what witnesses. You're in your lane. I'm in my lane. I just need to know what I'm doing. And Jose, that's not how he practices law. Every day, it's like, which witnesses are you doing? I don't know. We'll see how I feel in the morning. And it's really,
that's not,
no.
I can tell you right now, that's not going to fly.
And
we'll wing it.
What? And I was like, I mean, it was a real stress. You know, it started off as voir dire. And then I ended up doing the individual voir dire. You know, it started off with him, and then all of a sudden he's like, it's you. And then I did it. And then we got to trial. And I was like, I just need to know my lanes. I need to know my lanes. And because it's me, I would not stop pressing. And we had to, and in the end, I just said, just give me categories of people. I have to have categories. And so the categories I got turned out to be huge categories of people. Like, I did all of the patient family members, which were the hardest cross-examinations I will ever do in my life. I did all the experts. And those were, you know, in the end, it was 51 witnesses, and I think I did 40. So it was like everybody was kind of expecting it to be the Jose show, and it really became, you know.
This was your moment. No?
Yeah.
It was your moment. And once again,
so it's awesome.
True to form, you and the jury. The jury, you won, just completely won them over, and then some, as you do.
Yeah. I just was emailing with the juror Friday. She asked me if I would meet with her niece, who's an attorney, and those jurors, holy moly.
That's a lot.
Unbelievable group of people. They had a party afterwards. They invited us. We went.
I love it.
Oh my gosh. They loved, they loved us.
This is a great segue here. So if there was ever a question whether Diane Menashe is just like this star I don't think there's ever a question, but I think you were coming to your own there. But again, it was the Jose show.
Yeah. And
then here you were. But if you ever were to prove that you can stand on your own as a trial attorney and just crush it, up comes Matheau Moore.
Yeah.
And I personally, as you know, I was obsessed with this case. It was on court TV. I would walk my dog and I didn't miss one word. And there's sometimes I would just rewind it and I would listen again and I would listen again. And this case with Matheau Moore, I mean, the guy is on trial for killing his wife and calling it, basically, you know, framing it as a suicide, right? Let's go back to my mixer here and listen to it.
I watched that clock at 1:50 p.m. on August 25th, 2022. I remember telling you jurors that times were important in this case, and when I said that in voir dire, I had no idea how important. At 1:50 on August 25th, 2022, I heard, you heard, for the first time, that the state thinks Emily was killed in the woods. And if any one of you thought, when they heard that that now he followed her on the walk? And you said to yourself, oh, so that's their theory? That's reasonable doubt.
So my question, I hear this. I mean, did the prosecution just fuck up royally there? Or was like, because right there in that closing argument.
Well, in their closing, they were like, he killed her in the woods.
Right.
I'm like, hold on. We've been here for 2 weeks and he killed her at the house and then took her to this just in.
Right. So when I'm listening to this, I'm like, okay, game over. Game over. Right? I mean,
Court TV, the sense was game over. But I was in it.
These poor prosecutors, Diane.
I looked at the clock and I was like, I mean, that's why 1:50. You know, I don't take notes. I'm like, did he just fucking say that? And then I was like, oh, oops, he did.
But he also stormed out of the courtroom a couple of days. It was actually really. I mean, you had them so rattled. Yeah. And I have another clip here that I have to set the stage for.
So I want to say this though. This is because you're such a awesome athlete, and and sort of. This is like Husel, Brian Golsby taking the Quentin Smith case 8 months from Brian Golsby. Husel, me calling Jose because I knew him and saying, you got to let me on your team. Matt Moore. These all are examples of what can happen when you believe in yourself. And that is true. This is true in sport. This is really true in sport. When you're like going up against the number 1, number 2, number 3 ranked team. I mean, this is trial work. Yeah. Because by the way, in defense work, the state is always the number 1 or number 2 ranked team. They are. Because they are out resourcing you. They are out timed you. Everywhere you wanted to go, they've been there first. So it's like, no, their trainers are better. They're like, their ice is better. Everything's better. It's just dialed up a notch,
That's not what I saw.
But my point is that, Matt Moore, after Husel, I was getting a lot of attention, which, I felt was deserved for my entire career, but I was very thankful for it. And then Court TV and Law and Crime covered Matt Moore. And it was just me. Allie was there as my co-counsel, but I did every witness, every argument, and it was just me. And so...
And your Post-it notes.
And my Post-it notes, but this is... I know you always have like your hype song, like what song do you get hyped up, And I don't have a hype song. When I stand up, I always say to myself, totally simple, like when I'm about to stand up for a cross or a closing or a moment when I know this is it, I just say, let's fucking go. Yeah. And then I just stand up and I'm like in it. And I usually have a sticky note on the table that says LFG. That's good. Go.
That's good. Well, I have a quote here that you actually said in one of your, and it says, being in front of a jury is the ultimate physical grind and mental stress, while at the same time being the most incredible rush. I can't even imagine
it's
getting
incredible.
Up. I can't even imagine.
So for the closing, this goes back to your mixing skills, which you clearly demonstrated.
I'm really
talk about number 1 or number 2. So I felt like, I know everyone was like, I felt like I couldn't lose that case because I saw the prosecution and I was like, if this is enough to convict a man of murder, we're all fucked. Yeah. I felt that. He was white, right? Middle class. I was like, this Menashe, you can't lose this case. And then everyone was watching, but I really meant it like you can't lose it because it's yours to win. Yeah. And so the night before the closing, when I'm putting together the closing, I have my method to my madness. And, but my madness is I'm not scripted, which is, as you know. And when I stood up for that closing, I was like, I really did. I not only said, let's fucking go. I just told myself, this is going to be the best closing you've ever done. And I don't know if it was that, but part of it was I was so responsive in that closing to the state and that time thing. Like, did you guys just hear that? Like, what is going on? And me, I was on the ground in that case. I had the cord around my neck. Yeah. I mean, I was very much like that case really showed my theatrics in the courtroom.
No, you were Matthew McConaughey. You were up there, okay. And I'm just gonna because I was juror number 13.
Okay, yeah,
vicarious, okay. And it was amazing. So a couple things that just stand out to me are you when you were talking about voir dire and you wanted to bring the jurors back to when we were in voir dire, we have a history together, guys. Mm-hmm. And when you would do you're so much smarter than this, okay. And your use of authentic language, though, it was just common sense, along with your rapport, your ability to make people chuckle. And not that they were chuckling a lot, but there was a point where you kind of cracked a couple jokes and they were received. But I have this clip that I love so much. And you have to see the visual too. So I'm going to just describe it. So you have the two prosecutors, the one, he looks really young and he's heavily bearded. So he almost looks like a baby in a beard. And then you have a really good looking kind of redhead prosecutor. And she looks like the mean girl in like a movie where she just got took or something, So she's all puckered up and he's like this. And his body language is truly like he wants to collapse inside of himself. And so you go up there and this is what you say.
But it's speculation. Members of the jury, I remember when we did that voir dire so well, we talked about why we had to do voir dire. It's because not every juror is perfect for every case. We went back and forth and we both asked you questions and you saw us ask some people to leave because they weren't right for this case. But you were. You are smarter than to think a man could be convicted of murder based on speculation. In fact, I think the only thing that has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt is that they think he did it. For sure. Now that, for sure, they've proven that.
So in the courtroom, you go over and
by the way, it's so brilliant. I mean, because first of all, and I mean this, like people would be like, oh, that's shticky. That's actually the voir dire stuff is so legit because you have to put in effort to voir dire correctly. And I mean, tremendous effort. And, I'm not like doing voir dire from notes. Okay. I'm asking people, I'm having real conversations with them. I'm front loading my case in voir dire and then opening and all through the trial. But it's empowering. That right there. It's like going back to the sports analogy. That's the fucking locker room talk right there. That's what that is.
Yeah.
That is like, like you got this. You're the team that can beat this team. That's what that is.
100%. And you went over and you kind of put your hand on the thing, and then here's the bearded baby, and he's like this, and then the puckered up one. I mean, it looked like it came from a movie, and it's because of your sincerity and your effort and what you put into these cases. Not any attorney could just stand up and go, "Oh, you are saying things you've earned." The respect and the right and the things you're saying come from such a great place. And they know that there is no one in the world they'd rather have. Matheau Moore knew he had Diane Menashe on his side. And that's probably the only reason why he slept a wink at night while he was in that prison. Like seriously. And I mean, you can feel that. The jury can feel it. Everyone can feel it. And that's why the prosecution just melted in a little puddle. And so then they come back with a rebuttal.
Oh gosh.
So if it wasn't, this was already bad. Okay, this looked really bad. But then, and this is just me giving my honest opinion as a, the obsessive watcher. So then they have this, more experienced man come for this rebuttal, which apparently they do when they feel like they need a last minute, like Hail Mary. This guy gets up and in his infinite wisdom and experience decides to mock you. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? You haven't earned that. You don't do it well. And you just really took that house of cards for the prosecution and you went, dink, and it all came tumbling down, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, I got asked about that in the presser afterwards about like when the state said that, they were sort of saying like, oh, well, we're not as dramatic as Diane or, maybe we're whatever he said.
Yes.
And I remember thinking, like, like, first of all, it's a classic know your audience. Also, to your point, right, is to have that kind of rapport with the jury that is beyond the facts. That's how I describe that rapport. When you go beyond the facts and you're having that moment with the jury, you sure as shit have earned that moment. And if you haven't, go back to the facts.
Right.
because you're out over your skis. You're just in a place where they're not interested in you. And, you know, and I teach and you know this about me. I know that not everyone can do trials without notes. I understand that. And I know that having things written down is really important for some people, and that's how they're the most effective. But I will say, anyone that ever tries to talk me into writing down things, I will just say that I would completely lose the connection with the jury. I'm questioning a witness. I'm looking like I'm interacting with the jury. You know, when I had the cord around my neck with the witnesses, I would turn to the jury and put the cord around my neck despite the witness being here. Like, I'm understanding that if I'm a TV, you're my viewing audience, you know? And I say, like, being a jury is legalized voyeurism. And so, you know, when you aren't wed to paper and you are free forming it, you are able to have authentic connections, you know, and you can do things that people are like unexpected. You know, you get some wows, you get engagement, people leaning in. This is just like human nature.
100% it is.
You know, like when someone's giving a speech, if we have a president of the United States that's giving a speech and we can see their eyes where they're reading the teleprompter, we're kind of all out. We're like donezo. Versus someone that's an amazing orator and is really actually just saying something freely and authentically with passion.
But you know what it tells me is that you've done your homework and you know your shit.
That's
what it tells me.
Worked so hard.
You know, like yesterday, like preparing for this interview, right? Which is not anywhere near what you're doing. This is like little tiny, you know, tiddlywinks. But I texted you and I said, well, you and I just basically had an entire conversation as I was jogging my dog for 5.5 miles. You prepare and it works because you know what you're doing. The person knows you care about it and that you don't have to sit there and be like, okay, Diane, back in you just know your stuff.
Yeah. I would say in terms of my style, not my because I think my rapport with the jury might be like my best value add. But I think my style is, I would describe it as surgical. I don't waste time with witnesses. Yeah, my other thing is I like to be the most prepared person in the room. And I think I am.
You're the stroke.
Yeah. I mean, I just know the facts better than everybody else. And when you know the facts, not like the facts that work for you, because I tell all defense attorneys, actually, the facts that are awesome for you are the least important facts you need to understand. You need to understand everything they have and how it will likely play out and how are you going to continuously handle those punches. You know, how do you sit through a 3 hours direct of the lead detective and just keep like the visuals, just like, you know, again, going back to sport, you know, where the shots just like swish after swish after swish. And you're like, God, give me the ball already.
But I also like your angle where you don't like to call a bunch of witnesses. You sort of like to use them against themselves, which I think a lot of times, I mean, it works. Like you're like stealthily in a bush, kind of just like with your, you're just waiting for them to just
like I will tell you in Matt Moore.
Well, look at
the lead detective and also the head of the department. I love them. No, I really like them. And we joked before. They were like, you're going to destroy us. And I was like, no, but I'm going to do it softly. and you're going to end up having to come along with me. Like we joked about it. I mean, literally joked about it. But they became I couldn't have paid for that amazing expert because that amazing testimony, because the police really botched that case.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they did prosecutors botched it. Police botched it. And the combination thereof was a presentation of a case that was, I mean, I thought we should all be scared because I'm like, I really felt like if this is enough, we are in serious trouble. You know, it was like, well, it's the spouse. I'm like, well, that's danger for half of us.
Yeah.
For anyone with a spouse.
Well, we talked about their text messages, right? They were so benign. And we were like, well, shit. I mean, you don't want to see my tower.
And you know, the text messages from the year prior were like 2 phone books. And they literally had these numbers, like the visual was like this much. And I remember making a thing of that in closing. Like, this is the text messages that are the aha moment. And then when you read them, he was like, if you don't love me, you should leave me. I was like, I mean, that's a average Tuesday. And then I remember, like, from my lens, I said this in closing too. There wasn't even one swear word. He didn't even swear, like, fuck you. Nothing. And also there was no, like, I hate you. It was just like, if you don't love me like I love you, you should leave me. And I was like, okay. I mean, if that's enough. But it was a man, Matt Moore though was a really great case. And I also want to say, this is not an indictment on Matt. It's kind of interesting that there's like your question about Brian in the room and how was Brian in the room, you know? And here's the juxtaposition is Matt Moore is truly innocent. Like there's, you know, it's not my job to say who's innocent or not. There's no question. The man didn't commit that crime. I really struggle getting along with him.
Yeah.
Like
he probably wasn't in the best mood,
no,
I'm sure, but he also was, what was his personality?
He's just constantly focusing on the weeds, constantly in the weeds. And, you know, of course you're innocent and you're incarcerated. You don't have like a lens into the outside world. You know, and so you don't know what's going on. You don't know how much my prep is. You don't know what I'm doing when I say I'm prepping all day. Like he didn't know what that meant. So it was a lot of wanting to know what every weed looked like. And I'm like, dude, I don't have time for this right now. Like, you know, I don't have time to explain to you my process. He was frustrated that I didn't write out questions for witnesses that I couldn't provide to him.
I mean, you know, so putting yourself in his shoes, right?
No, I get it.
Could you imagine fighting for your life and having this person that he doesn't know you from anyone?
Totally.
Could you imagine what we would be doing?
And also him saying, well, I was just like, can you outline the questions? And I'm like, I don't work like that.
Well, you're like, I'm the stroke. I'm going to set the rhythm here.
And
this is what's going to happen.
It wasn't, you know, it was a struggle for us. It was a real struggle.
Well, I will tell you,
still did get him his clothes though and his belt. I just want everyone to know, like the clothes that he wore, I provided those clothes. I still do kind things for my clients, but he was a real struggle for me. And in the end, of course, with some perspective, because it's hard to have some then. You know, I reminded myself as much as I could about the empathy, you know, piece, which is he was innocent and he was incarcerated, and I don't know what that stress is like. And that's an understatement. And then, of course, the trauma on top of it is that he had lost his wife, you know, and then was being prosecuted for it, wrongfully so. So I don't know. I mean, and given what is amazing is he had no issues in the jail. He never, you know, he was an ideal inmate. And that is incredible, kind of, because you could think of him as like a ticking time bomb, if you will, right?
Yeah.
So he was so good in that way. He just wanted to understand my process. And because I wasn't going to share my process with him, or I wasn't going to change my process, he wasn't happy with me a lot leading up to it.
Well, when they announced the verdict, I think, you know, I have that still etched. I think it took him a minute. And your face immediately, I mean, you didn't want to get too excited, but that smile, that little smile you had of like, oh. And then when he finally, started to process, he just broke down.
He did, yeah.
And like, that was a moment.
And that is, if you watch that and you watch William Husel body demeanor when those verdicts were read, we should all remember those moments, because that's what it looks like when an innocent person's exonerated. Yeah,
that's exactly what I thought.
And I know it in the moment. Like, I know how that feels in the moment. And the reaction is so genuine, because it's almost like, can it be true? And then you see the relief of like, it is true. Like it has happened for me. It is, yeah. And that's when, if I ever have any doubt, and then that moment comes, it's like, I see that.
Well, as the 13th juror, and I was able to hear court TV and hear all the commentary about you, which was not to blow your head up or anything, but it was incredible to hear the respect and just the sheer awe of these people watching you in action. And so I was going through and I found a little one that I think is great. And I don't know who this guy is. You'll probably know who he is, but I love what he says.
I'm not going to lie. And those who were watching me yesterday, I am completely enamored, you know, with the defense attorney in this case. I think she should have her own action figure. She really, really, I mean, I'm telling you, I mean, I know that I sit in this seat now as an armchair quarterback, but I am a guy who goes into court and does this for a living my entire career. I am impressed. And obviously,
so I want you to know who that is. It's, well, first of all, I love, this is the best.
It's going to lead to my next question, though.
When he's like, she needs her own action figure.
Well, so that's my question, though. If you were a superhero, what would your superpower be? Your one superpower.
Shoot, I because I don't think like that.
You could be invisible. You could fly. You could read people's minds.
You know, the superpower would be not like the average one. The superpower would really be on the front end of things, you know, to make sure that the process was fair. I mean, there's a lot of innocent people that are charged with things.
Yeah.
And when I say things, it's anything from, you know, an F5 theft to 14, 20 counts of murder.
Yeah.
And I would be an incredible superpower. Right, to just stop that. Like I picture like stopping the train from leaving, you know, the station before it ever leaves, and to correct that injustice.
And I was thinking a lot about that too as I was prepping for this, and just how important it is to have this due process, and how many people are sitting. There are people sitting in prisons that did not do it. And could you imagine, like, you know, Shawshank Redemption, that movie? And of course, everything goes back to a movie and with my, you know, or Dateliner. Yeah. But you think about Andy Dufresne sitting there carving out, and not everyone's as resourceful as Andy Dufresne, but my God, you know, everyone deserves the right to a fair trial, and hopefully we do the right thing. But it's an imperfect world. Like how?
For sure. And, you know, I had the honor, it was such an honor in September to represent an individual up in Cleveland who had served 15 years before his case was reversed on Brady. The state had suppressed evidence from police officers that had actually exonerated him, you know, when he was originally charged back in 2005. And he did 15 years in prison, and his case was reversed and remanded for a retrial. And his attorneys came forward and said, would I do it on a pro bono basis? So, you know, for free. And I read the filings, which I do before I agree to take on a case at no cost. And I was like, I'm in. And we did the case, 2-week trial in Cleveland, and 14 counts, attempted murder. And, you know, we put up the evidence that was suppressed in the first trial and gave him the representation that he deserved and the due process that he was owed by the Constitution and the equal protection. And the jury acquitted him of all 14 counts within 2 hours. And what really struck me about that is Kenny was so hopeful. He's such a joyous person. And I've talked to him about that. Like, how could you be innocent and incarcerated and not just be angry? How could you continue to live? Because I question that about myself, because I'm not a person of religion. And I do understand that some people in that position turn greatly to religion as sort of a ring to hold on to. And so I think if it was me, what would I hold on to? But Kenny just says, you know, I chose hope over anger. And he says, I knew that you, my angel, would find me.
Is that what he said?
Yeah. He always says like the cutest things. He's like, you're my angel. He still texts on Christmas. He texts, you know, Merry Christmas, my angel. And I just think, what a human, what a testament to just the power, right, of hope and belief and faith that I am here, but I will not be here forever. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the Kenny Phillips case really got to me in just a really a powerful way of like, if Kenny can have that much strength and perseverance And I have to tell you, Keri, I was really tired in September.
I can't even imagine.
I was like physically really exhausted. And then we're up there and that case was big. I mean, that case was big. And I just kept reminding myself, like, Kenny did, like, Diane, like, let's fucking go here.
We can do this.
We can do this. You know, and I was really tired. And then there was Kenny every morning. You know, good morning, my angel.
Isn't it amazing though, where you like the inspiration you draw from?
Oh, it's and his family, unbelievable. His family, all those years. And you know why really the only reason why Kenny's case got reversed and why they found me was because he had a mom that never stopped believing in him. I told her this after the verdict when the jurors came down and the jurors hugged Kenny. They cried. They said, I was so sorry that you had to do this. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was so emotional. And I told his mother, you know, but for you, none of this. And it was such an emotional thing. Everybody's crying. The TV cameras are there. I said, but for you, none of this happens. And Kenny's still in prison. She never took no for an answer. No. Asked lawyer after lawyer, will you help my son? Everybody said, no, not for free. She's like, I got no money.
A mother's love.
Uh-huh. And persistence. Yeah.
So back to something that you just said.
Yeah.
So you were physically exhausted. And I feel, just knowing you in the amount of time that I have, you are in such a servant, like you serve and you give everything. And I think you've made lots of sacrifices. Everyone knows when Diane's in a trial, like I don't even want to, like no TikToks coming through, but in all seriousness,
no TikToks.
I don't think I know. I'd have to think really hard of anyone else I know that truly pours every ounce of effort and passion and belief into what they do. And there's got to be kind of, as you're giving everything to that, there has to be something happening do you get like physically just where you feel wrecked for a couple of days after a trial, or like where do you feel like the downside is of that with you personally? You're giving so much to this. You're giving everything.
Yeah, I was, I had 6 trials in 2022. And so I was really tired. And it's not like a tired like you get when you party too hard. Because
it's a little different.
This is different tired. It's just the mental grind of knowing everything, and I say knowing everything because every day it's 10 more witnesses, and if you think about the Husel case, like I remember, when I was tasked with the experts, the amount of hours that I prepped for the crosses, and the one cross was like 6 hours, and there was 3 million pages of medical records, right? And so you need to know the records, you need to know where you're going, you need to know what thematically are we trying to prove and how do I get there with a witness that literally is paid and trained to not let me go where I want to go. And then you add that mental, just having to be top of your game. And the physical, I know people are like, but you're sitting in court all day. Okay, it's so exhausting. It's like your adrenaline is on like max the whole time. So your sleep is not good, I don't drink during trial. I work out in the morning, or at least I try to every day. But then you're sitting. And quite frankly, you feel like shit when you sit all day long. Mm-hmm. You know what else you aren't doing? Drinking water, like doing the things that you need to be doing, getting up, walking around, And it's the culmination of just the stress and the big moments and then the dynamic with the client and your co-counsel. And it's really exhausting. It's taken a toll for sure on my personal life, for sure. I'm cognizant of that. I try to be better about how I use the moments of my life outside of the trial.
Yeah.
But I'm very not compromising about what happens when I'm in it.
Right.
I tell my clients, I have, 100 cases, and I know you're frustrated that I'm not giving you the time you deserve, but when it's your day,
Right.
when it's your day, it's only your day. You get all me. And my clients do feel that. I do not, when I'm in trial, I'm working on that. That is my life. I like just submerge myself in it. And then you have to figure out, how do you compartmentalize? Like, how do you, oh my God, the Husel, that's the greatest thing that's ever happened. I mean, who wouldn't want to like go to Mexico and go to Cabo and hang out at the Thompson and celebrate?
Right.
And instead I'm like, let's go. I was in trial a week later in Indiana. So, it's hard to shift. But what a privilege that I get to do what I love. And I love it so much. I say this particularly for women. We're so harsh on ourselves. And I could say, no one's harsher on me than me. And that I can't speak for any other woman, but I know this about myself, whether it's my appearance or, when I'm too something or when I'm not enough of something, I'm the first to recognize it, internalize it, and really kind of soak in it. I'd never let it affect my momentum moving forward, but we just know this. We're our own worst critics. And I wish we could all take those moments, right? And not all of us have them like that. But when our girlfriend is at a dinner party and they're like, oh my God, Keri's such a badass. Like, and she's not even talking about, it's not because you did these push-ups. She's like, Keri wanted to do a podcast. Next thing you know, she makes her dream come true. That we would listen to those moments and then actually like let them marinate and just be like, fuck yes. Like, a guy that is a legal analyst on law and crime, whose job it is to watch trials across the country, is like, this woman needs her own action figure. That's so badass.
And you know what? And it's okay for us to say that.
No, and I'm so I write a note. I'm like so appreciative of that moment. Separately, Matt Johnson, who's also who's on Court TV, covered the Matt Moore trial. And he and I became like friends during the coverage. And he has also, like, he'll be doing other trials and will say something like, well, if Diane Menashe were dying, it'd be done like this. And I'm like, and when people are listening, they're like, oh, oh, love yourself less. But here's my point. That is not me being arrogant saying that. That is me just being like, to be a criminal defense attorney, you do a job by definition that most people, if they don't think it's horrible that you're defending those people, they probably don't understand it. And then on top of that, your clients, for every reason, some of them are very understandable, completely do not express their appreciation. Matt Moore, I'll say this, I have not spoken to Matt Moore after the verdict. I mean, I saved that man's life. Mm-hmm. And he's gone. He's out.
Yeah.
And if somebody's like, well, what does that say to me? You know what that says to me is that is Matt compartmentalizing. Okay. That chapter of his life had to be done. It had to be done. I spoke with his aunt, who paid his fee and was very involved in like what things were going on and logistics and stuff. But, if anybody in their rosy thing is like, oh, Diane's, having great relationships with that, that's not the way it is. But because I haven't spoke with him, you don't get the Diane, thank you for saving my life. You don't get that. But then again, would we wonder why someone who went through that was innocent, why would I expect him to? No, I'm just saying, like,
I don't think you would expect it, but I think you would think maybe there would be a little bit of a bond there.
Well, but I'll tell you, William Husel is totally,
yeah.
I mean, not just that man, but his wife send me messages that are, it goes back to why that moment when it was just us standing at the table. I know as much as I'll never forget it. The feeling and the closeness. I don't mean just the proximity. I mean the closeness that I felt to a human at that time. Because I remember thinking, like, talk about we're in it together. It's just us. And I was, I had to prepare him. If it goes wrong, they're taking you out the side door. If it goes right, it's 14 counts, Can't show emotion. Just got to have your head down. It's got to get through every single count.
It's going to be a really good day or a really bad day.
Yeah. Best day of your life, worst day of your life. And he's like, how do you feel? I said, and I remember telling him, I said, I feel real sick.
Oh, I mean,
I felt so sick. And I don't remember even the verdicts being read. I have no recollection of it. It was just a moment when I realized like the cadence of it, but I was worried that the last count, we could go down on that. I was worried about that because of the issues with that charge. And so, but once it was, I remember the last count, obviously I have a random, a sense of what happened. But William Husel but he's the exception. Brian Golsby saved his life.
Well, yeah.
I mean, and so many, and there's no appreciation. So going back to, and this has nothing to do with work, when we hear those moments in our life that are like somebody else is looking at us, and it's like what a jury does. Fuck it, we should all just hold on to them.
Yeah.
Like ornaments on a tree. Put them up there. Right. And when we need to look at them, we go close and we're like, oh my gosh, do you remember when we got that? And those like moments when people see us for what we actually are.
And instead of it being perceived as arrogant or loving yourself, can it just be giving yourself credit where it's due?
Right.
Or is that also because, you can go back to the whole female thing or the woman thing and, just to maybe jet back a little bit to when, I don't know the prosecutor's name, but when he was trying to say that you were dramatic.
Oh,
well, would he have said that if you were a typical white lawyer stuffed in a suit up there? Would he have used those words? And so I think being a woman, we're supposed to just kind of be self-deprecating, and we're supposed to just kind of recoil. And so when you hear a woman say, "I'm really good at this, and I did a really good job with this," oh, she's arrogant. Oh, she thinks this of herself. Okay, no, these are negative words. I believe in myself because if I don't, who will?
Who will?
Who will?
And also, I didn't give him those words to say. So that's completely authentic, right? And my point about that, like taking in the moment when people are seeing us, is because that's so authentic. We can't control that. And, we're so harsh on ourselves. And I feel like it took me a while to get there in my work, but I'm unapologetic about how I am now. Like my theatrics in the courtroom, I'm not theatrical to be theatrical, but I will drive home a point. If the government wants to use a prop, oh, for sure as shit, that prop will become mine. Mm-hmm. I'm in it to win it, and I will be sarcastic when appropriate. I will kill him with kindness. I will understand that this is not a moment about me, and I will let that witness have that moment. I will completely adapt to whatever's coming at me. But it took, me a while to figure out, just own the shit out of who you are.
Yeah.
And we're so, culturally trained, we are, to be apologizing, for who we are, and kind of that's innate self-deprecation we do. Like, oh, I know I'm aggressive, but I need to be because of my job.
Right.
Why are you pre-gaming that? Right. And is it aggressive? And to your point is, why are you even putting a word on it? Just do you. Mm-hmm. And when I teach, people are like, they see me up there. And the first thing I say is when someone sees me do my thing, I'm like, let me be clear. Do not try what you have just seen.
Right.
It's like when you see some skater go off and do a flip. Do not try this at home, kids.
Right.
But the reason why you don't try it at home is because it's not you.
Right.
You do you.
You have to find your authenticity.
Totally.
Before, authenticity is your currency. It's huge, right? And you have to find that. Not everyone's going to have the same, Diane style.
No. And this is true of all of us. I think if somebody is out there describing me, whether it's my best friend or the person at the Starbucks store or a person at work or even someone that doesn't want to like me, if they said, she's no bullshit, she just says it like it is, I'm like,
I win.
Fuck yes, I'm done here.
I feel the same exact way.
I'm done here.
I feel the same way.
And you know what? There's a lot of people in my law firm don't like me.
Speaking of,
but they will say, she says it like it is.
So this is on, I've had this on a shelf here for the last 5 minutes. So speaking of your law firm, Ace Miller, first of all, ratio of men to women there. Just ballpark.
I don't know the ratio if we include the associates, but I mean, it's disparate. It's more men than women for sure.
Mostly white.
Particularly in the leadership and the senior partner level.
So I'm
mostly white. Yes.
Okay.
Very mostly white.
I have a visual, but I'm trying to figure out, in my world, if I had a Diane Menashe in my law firm, I am like, I mean, red carpet. I mean, you have to be like a LeBron James there. And so the question is, are you treated as such, or are the egos there so just cemented and just thick that you may not be as appreciated as I feel like I would perceive you to be? I picture you like walking in after winning a case like that, and like, I mean, again, movie, right?
It's not The Bachelorette.
Okay, you're not getting roses.
No, there's not a
What's
carpet.
it like? Or,
it's not like that at all, actually. But I'm a big believer in trying to focus forward and not back. And I will say this: the first, I went to a big firm 3 years ago. Before that, I had my own firm, and the adjustment, I think, in the vast majority of ways has actually been incredibly easy, because in the end, I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Like I'm a hustler, I mean it. I am a hustler. You can't have your own business. This, where you don't know if a paycheck's coming in and you still survive, thrive, and crush it if you aren't a hustler. If you aren't always thinking about strategically, what's my long-term here, right? And, you've got to live the chapter and read the chapter to know where it's going. And I just am really, in 2023, I don't believe in resolutions, because I don't. I don't either. I think resolutions are like, what are we going to fix? And quite frankly, we should love ourselves more, or give ourselves some more grace. But I do, in 2023, just want to like focus on those moments of like, dude, you did that. Not like, dude, you did that, and so now be arrogant. But it's like, that fills my cup.
Yeah.
And if my cup is filled, I mean, there's nothing I can't do. There's just nothing I cannot do. And I want to try so many more cases. I want to try bigger cases. I want to try, cases in California and Florida and Washington and Texas. And I just want to go.
But could you ever see yourself? So here's what I'd love to see you do.
Go.
Here's what I would like you to do.
Yeah, no, please.
I would love to see you in a Nancy Grace position eventually.
Okay, but I can't stand
I know this.
Okay.
I totally get that. What I mean by that is, I feel like you would be amazing on some kind of show where you're analyzing the cases. But would that feel like Tony Romo from the Dallas Cowboys? He was a quarterback. Then he starts banging Jessica Simpson, and his whole career goes, sideways. Now he's like out to pasture, being
but you're so much
a
cooler
commentator.
Than me. I didn't know about the Jessica Simpson.
Oh, that was a long time ago. But my point is, you're out and you're the QB, and then you're a commentator. Would that feel too much like is the, going back to the quote, the sport of this?
Yeah.
And is that what drives you to the point where you just couldn't imagine doing something that's not necessarily being a trial lawyer, but taking your experience and doing something like a court TV or something like that?
I'm trying to do more analyst work now, because I think it's a great opportunity, particularly in the future. And also, I think because we're in the sports analogy, the best athletes are the ones that know when it's time to actually call it. And it's not when you're injured, and the truth is that we all know it. It's like, what gets us is when someone retires after winning a world championship. That's like, and that's the way to go out. I mean, that's when you really controlling your legacy. And I respect the heck out of that discipline when athletes, when they call it, and they could have played longer, but they've played the game they wanted to play.
Yeah.
And that moment is going to come for me. And quite frankly, the energy and the time and the effort I give to it, it is not sustainable for, I don't know. I mean, it's a pace, it's a grind.
Yeah.
Especially if I want to try 5-6 cases a year, it's a grind.
Do you have any personal, I'm not going to call it resolutions, but do you have any things on the horizon personally? Like, you want to more work-life balance? You'd like to travel? Do you have anything on the docket? I mean, you just stated very explicitly you want to try cases in, you named about 12 states. So do you have anything that vivid and specific on the personal side?
Yeah, I mean, I don't use words like work-life balance, this about me. Because balance is, anyone that says they're balanced in their relationship or in their work, I mean, they're just kidding themselves, right? At any given time, it's 70-30 or 40-60 and that could toggle back and forth between us because life is imperfect. I do want, and I think I'm getting better at it. I definitely, I'm trying to use the moments outside of the work with more intention, and more intention of just doing, working on my house, right? Investing in, making sure that like where I live, I really, 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 really love it, And that takes time and that takes attention to make sure that, I'm creating that space. I definitely, this about me, I consider, my group of friends, my family, and you can't, if that's true, that's really true, and I believe that to be true for me, then you need to foster those relationships. Just like, we're like, well, I have to go to Cleveland for Christmas because I have to see my dad. Well, then the friends are the same way. Not that it's obligatory, but that takes time, right? And effort. And I want to continue and do more of that. And then I think the other thing that I'm trying to get better at is just really give myself some grace. I've been so hard on myself and just wanted for people to see that I'm good. And I feel like 2022, I'm like, okay, we're good there now. Like we're good there now. And I do feel differently about it. Like I went to Harvard to teach. This is my 6th year going there. I just went there in January, you know this, but the years that I've gone before, I did not go with the confidence that I just went with. I did not. I went with like, how am I here? Oh my gosh, I'm geeking out. These are like celebs here, because you're there with the best trial lawyers and judges in the country. Like literally my day 2, my partner was Michelle Childs, who was the number 2 pick for the U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, I'm just like,
fangirl.
And she was like, when we did introduction, she was like to the student, she was like, you do not know how amazing she is. And no woman in this country has tried as many cases as her or one. And she gave my bio. And I was like, I'm sorry. This is like Michelle. It was amazing.
Don't we all do that though? We all don't feel like we're like, they have a word for it now. What in this like imposter syndrome or something? That it's this thing where no one really deep down feels, we all feel like a clumsy, kid with 2 left feet. And they're all just people making their way through. And so for you, you're like, oh, but other people are looking at you like, wow, it's just a cycle. It's a total cycle. And you've earned your stripes.
Yeah. And that is, and I'm 49. So it's not like I'm 20 and I'm like, oh, now I'm good. I'm 49. I've been doing the same job, like hardcore, for, I did my first capital case 2 years out. So I've really been doing like high level litigation for a lot of years. And now after 2022, like I said, it was just so much of, going back to my love language, like I just wanted people to know that I was good. Mm-hmm. And now,
doesn't that sound like a little girl?
No, for sure.
It does. It's like we're all just little for sure. Kids wanting to be heard and understood.
And now I'm like, I'm good there.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the grace part, right? Is like, so you're good. So navigate the world. Yeah. And by the way, I'm not telling anyone like navigate from a place of arrogance, but if we all could navigate from the place of I'm good, we would all be so much better.
I totally agree.
Because we would just be walking through every door, every experience, every moment with a little bit more confidence. Yeah. And here's what happens when you have a little bit more confidence is you're able to be you. It's literally, this is what happens. I feel confident. I'm me. People love authenticity.
Yeah.
And it's like, just, I don't know. I just feel like after 2022, I just want to like be me, own the shit of it. I'm good. I'm good here. I want to like go to Harvard and make the most of experience and meet amazing people that inspire me and, love my friends because they're just badass. And you know, get better at pickleball.
There you have it.
You know, more walks with us and the dog. You know,
this is funny. I feel like even though we're being recorded, but these are how our conversations always go. I feel like we lock in and it feels like 10 minutes has gone by.
No, we do that.
But I feel like we do that.
And there's never like a big walk conversation or any really conversation that somehow with us doesn't involve our careers.
Yeah.
Which is not true of like every girlfriend, you know? No. But we're always like, we at least tap in on that, or there is, at least is the pulse check. Why are you doing that? You're certainly always like, Menashe, just again, I'm just here to remind you. Why are you doing that? And I'm like, well, and then you're like, okay, I'm checking in next week.
Oh my God, I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the Keri Croft Show.
Well,
this has been a total pleasure.
It's been awesome. Are you going to get action figure doll? Will you buy one?
I would buy more than one.
Do you think
I'd pass them out?
Do you think Dane would want one?
Dane would definitely want one. He would definitely want one.
Can you see it now, though?
It would be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, for all of you out there listening, thank you so much for joining me on the Keri Croft Show. If you like what you hear so far, maybe you want to go subscribe to my YouTube channel. Yes, I have a YouTube channel. Go listen to me on Spotify. And of course, follow and like me on Instagram. Diane, seriously, thank you so much.
Love it.
You're
Happy
the
to be
best.
here.
You're the best.
Well, you are the best.
We're both the best.
By the way, on the desk here.
I have 2 of them for you.
I feel like do the viewers or do the listeners know that it says Mission Badass on the desk in front of me?
No, I don't think so.
Well, just want you to know that's what the guests are looking at.
Hey, we have a very specific purpose in here.
Just, when you sit down, it's like, oh, so
your mission.
We're not half dialing this in. This is full throttle.
Hey, we're only here for a short period of time. We got to rock it all we can.
As I say, let's fucking go.
Let's fucking go and keep moving.